So welcome everyone to another episode of Cleantech Geek. I have the pleasure today to have with me Mr. Jeff Townsend, the founder of Critical Minerals Association. Jeff, welcome to Cleantech Geek.
Thank you, Patios.
Today we'll try to decode what is happening with the rare materials and minerals and the relationship that this has with the unprecedented, if you would like, boom for renewables. So it is, there's no question that we need to deploy more and more renewable assets and storage assets, but this has a knock-on effect on the supply chain. So we'll try today to decode a bit of what is happening in the supply chain.
Well, I think we would be here hours if we do that.
Excellent. All right. So, Jeff, just very briefly introduce yourself and what your association does for our viewers.
Perfect. So I'm Jeff Townsend. I founded the Critical Minerals Association in 2020. My background is family background in mining, but I went into politics and I did politics as 20 years as an advisor on foreign affairs, South Africa, US, and also in the UK. Very concerned with the industrial strategies that were coming out.
Mm-hmm.
Felt that they didn't understand the supply chains that were necessary to deliver them. So tried to bring together the industry that are in that supply chain in the upstream and the midstream, give them the voice to be heard and to subsequently get the government to give them the support to grow and feed in and provide.
Excellent. How many members do you have now?
So in the UK we have 40-ish, and then we have two sister associations as well. We have CMA Australia, which is going really well, and 3 weeks ago we launched CMA USA as well.
So you have about how many thousands of people working in these members of yours?
Oh, I'd like to say thousands. It's I just don't sleep. Don't worry. But no, we've got a good team around the world, and we have a new body, CMIA, which is launching next month, and that will be a mechanism which we bring those domestic associations together. So we can have those global conversations around ESG, supply, etc.
So, just to set the scene a bit, can you give us the current state of your industry? What is happening in the minerals industry, and especially in regards to rare earth materials like lithium, for example?
Excellent. So we've never seen anything quite like this. This is a brand new epoch as we transition away from hydrocarbon economy. We're going into this renewable energy economy, which is really interesting. But at the same time, those building blocks for the renewable energies, lithium, graphite, manganese, rare earths, are also being used as the building blocks for the high-tech manufacturing that we're doing. So the electric vehicles, and also the satellites and the drones and robotics and AI, all of those are using the same minerals, which has never really happened before. So what we find is demand has massively increased, and because we kind of walked into this, supply is not catching up with demand. Demand is racing away from supply and will continue to do so probably for another 5 to 10 years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So you asked about lithium and you asked about some others, let's say copper and rare earths. So in lithium, we're probably going to see a 600% increase.
600%?
600% increase in demand for lithium. Supply is probably going to increase about 300% by 2030. So whilst we are dramatically increasing the amount that we're supplying, we're doubling the amount that we are demanding. And that's coming from everyone doing electric vehicle, lithium-ion batteries, and also the storage for wind turbines and solar panels, etc., that also need these lithium-ion batteries. So lithium faces a real crunch. Copper is the most interesting. So copper is not necessarily seen as a critical mineral. It's only recently started making its way onto critical mineral lists. In the next 50 years, we will have to mine the same amount of copper as we have over the past 5,000 years. So in the next 25 years, the same amount that we have mined over the last 5,000 years.
That's mind-blowing.
It's mind-blowing, right? Now, the minerals are there. The Earth has the minerals to provide that. But let's look at it a different way. it takes about 17 years for a mine to go from exploration, from you and I forming a company and going digging in the ground saying, there's copper here, to actually being a fully operational mine and selling that copper onto the market. It takes about 17 years. So we started today, that's 2040 when that copper becomes available. Well, by 2030, the whole world has moved to electric vehicles. We're a long way from where we need to be.
And I mean, how are we going to cover what sort of steps, immediate steps do you see there in order to somehow mitigate that shortage?
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? So a friend of mine coined the phrase "the new great game," David Livingston, and that really is where we are. So over the last 50 years, China has been incredibly smart. It saw where the world was going and it built this supply chain. The rest of the world historically has felt like we are the downstream. We buy our products from midstream players, which is China. So look, rare earths, China has anywhere between 85 to 95%.
And that's just your geography. We can't change that.
We can't change where the minerals are. We can change where they're processed.
Right.
So China is not dominant in the minerals in the ground, but they have over the last 50 years, specifically the last 20 years, created this brilliant processing hub. So nearly all critical minerals go to China to be processed. So what does that do? That sucks a lot of the downstream players into China because they know they've got security of supply. What does that mean if you're trying to build solar panels in the EU or wind turbines in Northern Europe or America or electric vehicles in the UK? It means your chances of getting your hands on those critical minerals are reduced because you're not next to them and you're not in that sphere of influence. So what do we need to do? What we're seeing is now a race. So we're seeing the Western world starting to collaborate to race against China and securing. That's predominantly based around relocating that midstream. So building new midstream productions. Look at the USA. So it has released the Inflation Reduction Act, all about attracting companies into America to build electric vehicles and green technology, and that is predominantly based around the midstream. Yesterday we released our paper on the midstream requirements for the UK, but that's been echoed by the UK government, who released its refresh paper. Mm-hmm. So its new policy on critical minerals was released last night, and that's part of the integrated review. So they're now looking at, okay, what do we need to spend, what do we need to do in terms of tax breaks, in terms of utilization of free ports to try and attract that midstream processing and refining to our country, therefore securing supply and therefore securing those downstream jobs. And why is that important? It's really easy to show in the electric vehicles area because in the UK about 800,000 jobs are aligned to the automotive sector. If you don't have gigafactories being built here, you don't have electric vehicles being built here. If you don't have electric vehicles being built here, 800,000 people potentially lose their job. Mm-hmm. That's quite scary. So
it is quite scary.
Building that supply chain has become an incredibly important part of every government in the Western world, and China, Japan, South Korea, in their objectives into the next 20, 50, 100 years.
So in a sense, the sort of surge in demand, the response of the industry is to create more hubs of processing around the world. Mm-hmm. So I guess minimizing cost or minimizing also transportation and time of processing those materials.
Absolutely. So the first part is the government wanting security of supply. The second part is we're starting to see companies wanting ESG compliance, so environmental, social and governance compliance. So the best quality, making sure that the environment wasn't hurt, making sure that society benefited from the supply chain, and making sure there was no bribery in the governance of the supply chain. So the idea that if you have regionalized midstream production, say in the EU, is easier for those companies based in that region to keep an eye on their supply chain and what's going on in it, and therefore securing that ESG compliance, and with that ESG compliance attracting more customers. We're starting to see at least in some sectors, we're starting to see younger, under 30 consumers and business leaders taking ESG as a very important part of their industry. So they're starting to look at, would you pay a premium for having ESG compliant products? Which is really strange, because then you have, say, lithium, you already have a 300% deficit, and then on top of that you say, here's our cheap, non-ESG compliant lithium, about that much, that's 80% of what's in the world, and then 20% is ESG compliant lithium, and suddenly that's more expensive. So as a producer in Europe, do you pay more for that ESG compliant lithium, or do you pay less, knowing that it's probably got a few issues in its production, but it's going to save you some money?
I guess this is a very serious issue, and it was a very good pass to my next question, because we're talking about mining and we're talking about sustainability and also responsibility. Some of the accusers, if you would like, of this green revolution say, okay, you know what, here is your unauthorized mining, that you have 15,000 people in a pit mining cobalt or lithium or whatever else, and this cannot be actually the sort of ethical or responsible mining that people are looking. So how is the industry actually responding to this, either from a downstream point of view and also midstream point of view, if you would like?
Yeah, so I think there's three things to take into account here. We all want the world to get better. You're in your job because you want to make renewable energy, and you want the world to be a better place.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm involved in what I do because to build those products that make this green economy, that make sure we hit Paris Accord targets of 1.5%, or keeping global warming below 1.5%, ensuring we reduce our carbon footprint, we need to build the products, the renewable energy, the solar, the wind turbines, the solar panels, the electric vehicles. We need to automate certain parts of the supply chain. All of that needs minerals. So we are going to have to dig our way out of the problem we have caused. We cannot reduce the amount we mine. It doesn't work that way. We can talk a very nice game of saying, oh, we want to make the world a better place, but in reality, we have to do something to do that, and that means building products. And everything you build has a mineral in it. So the first thing is we have to mine more. Absolutely right. Where it is done incorrectly, where it is done wrong, that needs to be held absolutely to account, because there's no reason. You can't build a better tomorrow if you accept your responsibility today. If you destroy the world today, saying, but it's okay, you can get in the minerals because I want to build a better tomorrow, it's rubbish. It's a lie.
Yeah.
Right. So we have to take that into account. And then three, look, the industry has got a bad rap. In all the films, the miners are the bad guys.
Yeah. So we need to change that perspective.
Yeah, right. So and you can understand that from the 70s and 80s, things were done differently. There was a bit of a watershed moment around the 90s and the early 2000s. There's a company called Xstrata that really changed the game in the way that they did things. They've been bought out by Glencore, but they've really changed the game. And subsequently, the mining industry is revolutionizing the way that it operates. So we're starting to see the use of satellites and non-invasive techniques into the way that we search for minerals. So we don't just go around ripping up rainforests, etc. We're doing this all thousands of feet in the air. We are starting to engage and collaborate and win over the social license to operate. That license from the local community to operate is now as important as the finance you have to make this project. If you don't have it, you don't have a project.
And I think there is a discussion about educating the local communities, because there is a lot of misconceptions and a lot of fake, in a sense, fake perceptions, you would like, with local communities in mining.
Of course. And you can understand some of that. You take the First Nations in Canada. They haven't exactly had the best history with the mining sector historically, and that is subsequently changing quite a lot, which is quite important. And then the third thing that we see is the utilization of new technology. So we don't need to have such massive destructive locations and environmental damage. There's ways that you can mine now that are much more focused, and therefore you're damaging significantly less. And of course, and there's companies called Rob Bell would kill me if I didn't mention this, life cycle assessments. Right, so they're now being built into the very beginning. So how do you operate that mine through its life cycle and leave it in a better state than when it opened? Mm-hmm. So all of this taken together is the modern mining world is significantly different to what we visualize in our heads. And so that has to be taken into account. Is it perfect? No. I think anyone who says it is lying. Mm-hmm. Are there people who will go out there and do it in the wrong way? Absolutely there are, and they need to be held to account. On the back of that, there's two areas that we need to take into account. So one is the multiplier effect. So I worked in international development for a bit, trying to make the world a better place. And the major way you can do that is providing economic benefits to a local community. So a mine, and generally look at where they are in the developing world, they are in more remote locations. A mine in Africa has anywhere between a 15 to 19 multiplier effect. So every one job you create on the mine, you create 19 in that local community. That's a game changer for those local people. That means schools. It means the kids don't have to go and work because their parents are earning enough money, which means that those kids can go to school. They're now more educated. It means the local mining operation usually brings in health, because why do they do that? Oh, they're doing it to buy off the community? No, they're doing it because they're businesses, and a healthy workforce is a better workforce.
It's a better workforce,
right?
Yeah.
But those health impacts then spread throughout the community. Mm-hmm. And as the community grows and that mine grows, you start to see more commerce taking place, people reskilling in terms of engineers, and those now becomes a functioning economy. So that's really important. You touched on artisanal mining, and this is still one of the issues. It's a double-edged sword. On the one side, it provides an income for people who have nothing else, no other opportunities. On the other side, it is because it's unregulated, because it's not part of a mine, it's just people going to a location and digging the ground, finding something. Significant health and safety issues, and also the use of child labour. And these artisanal locations are often, in some jurisdictions, are tied into militia activity and conflict. And again, there is significant issues there. So we all want. I don't want to take away those jobs, absolutely not. But I do want to clean up artisanal mining to make it safer, more structured, and take away that child labour. Mm-hmm. If you can do all of that, you can reduce the links to conflict.
And I think you've touched on a very sensitive point. I mean, we're discussing about the green economy and the green revolution and the new way that things are mining, but we need to keep in mind that all of these goes into the same sort of, we need to address issues like poverty.
Yes.
In order to make sure that we can go through with the green revolution and with the best practices in mining and all other different sectors. So I think all of these issues that we see in third world countries or developing countries, I don't want to be, seen, to be pessimistic, but all of this is somehow interconnected.
Yeah.
So we need to be there in order to address these issues. Okay, touching on another point, we've met very recently in a conference, and in that conference we were also discussing about recycling. Mm-hmm. So, first of all, do you see recycling as part of the solution on the demand shortage? And when we discuss about recycling, what is actually happening and how much can we recycle right now? Because we see that there is also a volume issue. Maybe we don't have enough volume right now in order to boost recycling even more. So what's your take from that side of the coin?
Well, look, so the circular economy has to be one of the key pillars that we build this future green economy on. But you need to build those products first, let them run through their life cycle, and then you need to recycle them and put them back through that midstream that is being relocated around the world. So if we took all the mobile phones in the UK and we put them all in and we took out the stuff, we'd get about 1% of the critical minerals back that we need. Mobile phones are very small. Electric vehicles are very large. Wind turbines are even larger. But wind turbines, let's say the first ones went in, and you'll know this better than I do, but let's say in the UK 2005, they have about a 25-year lifespan, let's say 20 years, just start a bit. So the first wind turbines really en masse that will need recycling will be about 2025. Okay. The first real push though, so let's say now 2020, those ones will be coming on to be recycled in 2025. So there's a lag, there's a delay. And so whilst it's not a short-term solution to those requirements, it's not going to find that 300% that we need for the lithium. It's not going to find the all the copper that we require, 700 million tons extra, something like that. It will solve problems in the future. Now, that leaves us with 2 or 3 issues. The first one, you have brilliant companies like Hypermag that are finding ways to recycle industrial magnets. So they use a patent and a technology, and they can significantly reduce the amount of energy they use to take a magnet out of an iPad or a mobile phone and recreate industrial magnets from that 100% recycled magnets. It's mind-blowing, brilliant stuff. But there isn't enough feedstock at the moment to make that a commercially viable play.
So it needs to be subsidized.
So someone has to find some funding for this, because why would you, as a finance house, go and put your money in that project, which has got maybe 10 years until it starts making money, or you can go and shove it in a copper mine that's already operating and you can get your money back, or you can put it into fintech, or you can put it into one of the automotive sectors. So there is a delay in the delivery of critical minerals from the circular economy, and there is in that delay also gives us a shortage of finance to take those R&D, so lower TRL projects in the circular economy and take them to commercialization quickly. But that's where they need to be. Which, and it's got to be the way forward. It's got to be, because what does it allow you to do? Actually, by the circular economy, it's greener. There will always be waste. There'll always be lots of little bits lost all around the place. So we'll always need to mine. You'll never have 100% circular economy. But you can significantly reduce the amount you need. So in years 2035, 2040, 2050, the amount that we're actually required to mine significantly drops, because we'll have built the products and more of that stuff will be recycled. Brilliant. So that's 1. 2, security of supply. If it's in your country, you no longer need to go and find it around the world. You just got to recycle it and put it through a midstream and then put it back into the supply chain. So that's really good. And 3, generally it takes a lot less in terms of carbon and energy and water use to recycle. And
then to dig up something.
Right, exactly, to dig up something. So the environmental benefits are also a lot better. And then 4th, where does our waste go at the moment? There's a huge e-tech mountain in Ghana, and you see people ripping stuff out and burning plastic and metals just to get copper out. And it's often 4 or 5 year olds. It's dreadful.
It is
and they do that because they can resell that. We have to do better.
And looking at the because there's always this sort of question when we go in conferences, from current lithium battery, how much can we recycle? So look at a lithium battery, standard one that you use in cars, let's say.
So lithium-ion batteries are interesting at the moment, because we're starting to see, again, that lower TRL technology is starting to come into play. And so so taking a lithium-ion battery and breaking it apart and recycling all the minerals out of it that we can. That technology is starting to be brought to the table. But at the moment, mostly what happens is you get the battery, you rip it up, dispose of it, and you create it into a black mass. And from that black mass, you suck out the lithium, because that's the easiest one to get. But you're losing graphite, you're losing manganese, nickel, etc. So it's a very wasteful system that's the mainstay at the moment, but it's significantly better than anything else.
Yeah.
I'm reminded of Winston Churchill, who said democracy doesn't work, but it's better than anything else we've tried. So, this is the best that we have right now, and therefore needs to be supported. Over the next 10, 20, 30 years, new technologies will be invested in, and they will bring new ways forwards. But yeah, it's still very, relatively wasteful. And if you look at recycling rates, some things like copper are relatively easy to recycle. Some things like lithium and rare earths are incredibly hard to recycle, and there's some stuff that is nigh impossible. Someone bragged to me the other day they had a 2% return on their recycling. I was like, it's probably not worth bragging about.
Yeah.
But 2% is better than 0%. So.
But you're looking at about 30% recovery of material in these sort of situations.
Yeah, something around that 20. Yeah. I mean, I know some areas you're looking at 15%.
15%.
And some 30, 40. If you get up to 50%, you're doing incredibly well.
So there is a massive opportunity there for research and development in this sort of area alone.
Yeah, and like I said, that technology is starting through the universities and through government grants. That technology around the world is starting to become understood. It's just commercializing it. We can do it at very small levels, but to make it commercially viable at larger levels, you need volume, and we just don't have that at the moment.
And do you see that R&D as a solution to the shortages as well? Do you see more money into the US, Europe, Middle East being pumped into research and development to replace some of these rare minerals or create composite materials, for example?
Absolutely, and I think as we start to understand the demand and the supply problems that we face, other minerals that people have perhaps said, it's too difficult, become increasingly important. So vanadium for batteries. Now you're never going to have, or I don't believe you'll have a vanadium battery car because they're too big and they're too large. But in terms of storage for wind turbines or solar panels or in households, that or industry, they're brilliant and they don't lose their charge. So vanadium batteries have got a real benefit. We're starting to see sodium batteries coming online. We're starting to see new generations of lithium-ion batteries where they're taking out the cobalt because there are concerns around artisanal mining. So all of that R&D is starting to take place, but in essence, it really started 5 years ago. It should have started 15 years ago if we were to meet 2030, 2035 targets. So we were well behind where we need to be. But you have to start somewhere.
You need to start somewhere.
Right, we've started. And it just takes one person with a smart idea, and they can revolutionize things. And so, we absolutely need to have many different types of use of different minerals, different products. For instance, if you look at a Tesla, they use a lot of natural graphite. Why do they use natural graphite? It's very expensive, but it also conducts electricity very well. You see a small city runaround car, they're doing 50 miles. They don't need that really expensive graphite. It conducts electricity brilliantly because they don't need to have the density and the length of journey. So they'll use different type of graphite now. So you're starting to see graphite and different types of graphite being used in different applications. And I think that kind of thinking is going to permeate around the world in different types of industries. Now, I'm not a renewable energy expert, but I assume that you'll be able to use different blends of minerals, materials, and wafers, etc., in solar panels depending on where you're operating.
Different applications.
Different applications,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So then you don't have so many competing necessities for the same minerals if you can start to build them into different places.
Yeah, and what I have to add to that is that we often forget that renewables is a very young industry per se. We expect within this decade to see increase in efficiency, which maybe will be more than 10%, comparing with what we had, between 2010 and 2020. But I will take one of your cues, if you would like, and just try to look at this macro environment and try to connect the dots here. We have the geopolitical tensions now between Russia and Ukraine, and also we have this sort of drive for change and to revolutionize or change completely the energy mix, at least within Europe. And let's keep it local, if you would like. Sometimes we think that the European problems are the worst problems, and it's not that. We need to have change the perspective here. But looking at Europe, if you would like, we have a situation where people are saying you're just replacing, dependency on Russian gas and oil with dependency on China on minerals and materials. So how do you see that playing? I mean, what do you think the sort of policies that governments are bringing in the West, or let's include Middle East as well, if you would like, to mitigate that sort of dependency, because we've seen that happening, so we don't want to happen again?
So the first thing is, yes, predominantly, as I understand it, the solar power energy and wind turbines, most of the components come from China. And why are they there? Because you have the midstream in China, and therefore, it's security of supply, and it's easy to do, and it's cheaper. So that all makes perfect sense. What's the difference though? Russian oil and gas, that's oil and gas that has come from the geographical region of Russia, or from Russian-owned assets globally. That you can't really move. You can't move that. That is where it is. Whereas you can move the production of solar panels and wind turbines anywhere in the world. It's in China at the moment because it's cheapest, and that's where the technology is. But that technology can be transferred, and as long as the consumer is willing to pay the price, then you can move anywhere. It might be fluctuations in energy costs, there might be fluctuations in labour costs, but generally there is an opportunity to move it. So the dependency is not as high as it would be based on hydrocarbon dependency. So that's number one. Number two, it's quite a singular approach. My counter argument would be, nevertheless, where you get it from, we don't have time to sit back and not deploy as many renewables as we possibly can as quickly as we can. We're starting to see the likes of Saudi Arabia just going hell for leather into solar panels and winter and green renewable energy, and they have money to burn, and it's and there's going to be a real shift in what they're able to bring to the table. The US likewise throwing billions at the problem. We have the UK's budget tomorrow. I actually think there will be billions. I'm not saying how many billions, but I believe there will be billions put on the table for renewable energy.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed, right? I'm a very optimistic individual. And then Australia is starting to have some of the huge, so everyone is starting to bring their own kind of play in, and again, when these things are in place, it significantly reduces the amount of. But my key thing is time. We don't have time. If we're going to stop the world from burning, we need to deploy renewables. And to put that into context, something I learned at the beginning of this year. So if we start from January the 1st, 2023, every 3 months is 1% towards 2050. Right, so we, at the end of March, have already used 1% of our time to meet those Paris goals. By the end of 2023, we'll have used 4%. It suddenly starts to ramp up and go very quickly. And as soon as you think about it like that, you realise that That's got to be the driving force as to why we employ and deploy renewable energy as quickly as possible and as efficiently as possible.
And connecting that with the minerals, do you see, do you see specific policies being, in place or coming up, if you would like, in order to start becoming more self-sufficient?
Yeah.
At least maybe if not on the actual mining side, on the downstream, but midstream, let's say on the processing side of things.
Yeah, there's drive from everywhere. So the EU releases its critical raw materials act today. The UK released its paper, its refreshed critical minerals paper yesterday. Obviously the US released its Inflation Reduction Act earlier in the year. Saudi Arabia has got billions, many billions and that is deploying to become a midstream powerhouse. It's very well located. If you think minerals coming from Africa, from Australia, going into downstream producers in the EU, Saudi Arabia
it's in the middle.
The Middle East is right in the middle. It's the perfect place for a midstream. So we're starting to see a lot of different countries now chasing that agenda and putting money into it that we have not seen previously.
Let's talk about the collaboration, because you would expect that it should be something on the table that especially manufacturers from our side of the industry should be speaking a lot with your members, if you would like. So do you see that happening? Do you see that engagement starting to happen?
It's starting a little bit, but we would love to have a more constant, fluid and open dialogue. Again, the reality is our UK, Australian and US members, they're feeding into those domestic markets, but as we spoke about earlier, most of the components of the renewable energies at the moment are based and come out of China. So as that transitions and we start to see a bit of a equalizing in the global market of where these downstream products are made, I'm hoping there'll be more and more conversations. But look, we're here to help, to discuss, to find ways of collaborating, because ultimately you guys are the guys who buy our supply chain. And so your actions determine how successful our companies can be. We're hoping that our companies, by being proactive and creating these supply chains, can attract more to the UK or to the EU and provide that security, so you don't feel like you're under threat on securing whatever minerals it may be.
And let's talk about price, because you talked about security. So looking at this sort of, again, unexpected rise in demand, and we were discussing again in the conference that a lot of the funds and the EPCs and the owners are expecting some sort of stability in the pricing, at least of the materials we buy, which is panels and inverters and everything else we do. But you gave a different sort of expectation, perhaps, or outlook. So what is the expectations on prices, if you would like, at least for the foreseeable future? And we don't have a crystal ball, but we can...
No, I know, and this really, we were sat there and I was thinking to myself, how are the two so completely different? Our prices are tripling, quadrupling across the board. 200% increases, 300% increases. Tin in 2 years increased by 132% in cost, right? So we're starting to see in critical minerals all these prices ratcheting up, and that's because everyone is now seeing that demand is going to outstrip supply. And yet, I sat on that panel, and everyone else on the panel says, well, our prices are stabilizing, if not going down slightly. Now I'm guessing, and I'm assuming, that's because China has a secure supply. It has relatively doesn't have a demand deficit, and therefore can provide at a stable price. Whereas the rest of the world is still playing catch up, and therefore demand is going to be a little bit wobbly as we try and catch up and play that. So I'm guessing that's the difference, but it was it opened my eyes to just the reality that our prices might shoot through the sky, and then why would you move? Why would you buy a European-made wafer or component? Why would
There are different opinions here, I think, on the market, and people are saying that the security of supply would be something that a lot of the off-takers would be willing to pay a premium to secure, but others would say that actually we're playing here with pennies in order to make an investment feasible or not. So everything counts.
Yeah.
So I would say that it's investment appetite and investment risk. And some investors will feel much more comfortable of paying a premium just to secure that, ESG compliant, let's say, pipeline, and others will not.
And so, my background in politics, what I'm starting to see rumblings of, whether it will become reality or not, I don't know. But there are more and more rumblings of ESG factors being key components of market access. And I guess therefore, if you are building in the EU or the UK or Australia or Canada or whatever, USA, if they put these ESG barriers in place, that may limit where you can buy your components from. And I guess that starts to then bring in that, that pricing, and it becomes very complicated.
And also we have import tariffs, we have, governments trying to regulate, the supply chain. So we will face that as well. Being mindful of time, I would just like to, make a final question, if you would like. How do you see the biggest sort of opportunities or challenges on your side of the fence? What would you, in the next, let's say, 10 years, what would you say that in mining, in critical minerals, would be the biggest opportunity, but also the biggest challenge that you are working with your members right now to overcome?
Okay, so I can give so many different answers to keep little bits of the industry happy, because the reality is everything needs to happen, right? So that's the difficult thing. What I find interesting at the moment is that demand-supply mix, right? Now, there are frontier markets that just Western nations cannot go to or will not go to because of geopolitics, difficulties of operating, etc. The reality is, if we're going to meet that global demand deficit, the minerals in those locations need to be extracted. And it comes to my head because I was talking to someone yesterday about this, but Iran has just found, well, they say they found the second largest lithium deposit in the world. And Iran has 7% of the world's copper in its southwest mountainous region. So minerally, massively important to the green agenda. And yet, since 2015, Iran has been non gratis at the table of the geopolitics, and so no Western nation can go and operate there. Will that change over the next 2-3 years? We've just seen Iran and Saudi Arabia signing an agreement on starting diplomatic discussions again. So maybe they are coming in from the cold, and maybe in 2-3 years' time, when the West has decided that things have settled down and we can start having negotiations and discussions, maybe suddenly Iran becomes a frontier market. For me, that's very exciting, because there's untapped regions of the world that can solve these problems, and yet no one can go and do it. I think, for me, what's happening in certain locations in the world is awful. We've got to hold those governments to account wherever that may be. But equally, we have to solve a much bigger problem than those as well, which is meeting the challenges of climate change. And like I said, that clock is ticking. We need to do everything we can to meet net zero and do it in the right way. But that we can't be, we can't shut locations off.
We don't have the luxury to do it.
We don't have the luxury to do it. So, the next 5 years, diplomacy is going to have to be much stronger than it currently is.
Jeff, thank you very much.
Gracias. Thank you ever so much. That's been brilliant. Thank you.